Now, Donald Trump is set to sign an executive order to reinstate thousands of US service members who were let go for refusing the COVID vaccine. Now, this jab was, of course, mandated by the former Biden administration. But look, Josh, I think this is great news. From your perspective, how shocking is it that there were about 8,000 members of the US military who were discharged, left in limbo in the first place because they didn't get the jab?
Well, it's disgraceful. It's truly nothing short of disgraceful. And by the way, this is a very good sign, Danica, that Donald Trump is doing this, because recall that Operation Warp Speed, which got the COVID-19 vaccines from Moderna, Pfizer, and so forth there, that all started under Donald Trump. And if we're being honest here, Donald Trump's rhetoric on the vaccines was not necessarily always in touch with many people in his base, because he continued to tout Operation Warp Speed there. He was, shall we say, I guess, less skeptical of the vaccines than, for instance, our governor here in Florida, Ron DeSantis. So it was something of an open question, frankly, when Trump got back into office, how he would approach the COVID-19 vaccine issue. This is a very, very promising sign, as is, of course, the fact that he has nominated RFK Jr. to lead the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services there. So all the signs are actually headed in the right direction when it comes to real reform, when it comes to public health in America there. Speaking not just of public health, though, but also military morale. One of the most important things that this current administration has to do, we have no choice whatsoever, is to boost morale in the U.S. Armed Forces and to ultimately inspire the young men and women, but really especially young men of this country, especially in the South, Midwest, the Rocky Mountains there. You need to inspire them to actually physically head out the door, go to the local recruiter and sign up to ultimately put it all on the line and, God forbid, risk your life to defend your country there. These are the kind of policies that I think send an unmistakable message to our young men and women there that this country has your back, and your body, you can do with your body, as the left has said for a very long time here in America when it comes to the abortion issue. But here, when it comes to the vaccine issue, at least, you can do with your body whatever it is you want. Once upon a time, the left agreed with that, albeit in a slightly different context. I'm not sure if they agree with it here, but that's their loss, not ours.
Absolutely, it is their loss. And also the world has changed now. This is a very different America under Donald Trump. So I think good on him, because there's so many military personnel who want to do their job, who want to serve America. So good on them for being able to come back. Now, speaking of executive orders, Donald Trump is also expected to sign one restricting transgender troops from serving in the military. Now, this new order requires Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to update medical standards to ensure they prioritise readiness and lethality and take action to end the use of invected and identification-based pronouns. Good on them. This order also restricts sleeping, changing and bathing facilities by biological sex. Yeah. Josh, how good is it, firstly, to have a military that is actually focused on defending America and not on DEI?
Danica, the military has one goal, literally one goal, which is to hunt down and kill the enemy in the most lethal and most efficient way possible, in a way that prioritizes the American national interest and that minimizes civilian loss of life. There is literally no other goal. There is no interest in making sure that certain people of different life backgrounds, that different sexes, that different sexual orientation, that different subjective gender identities, there is zero national interest in forming a military, for God's sake. A military is not your local McDonald's branch office. It's not your local public school teachers board administration, whatever. It's the freaking military, for God's sake there. America has real enemies. We have China. We have Russia, with North Korea, Iran, ISIS. I mean, you name it there. I mean, we have very real enemies on the world stage there. And again, this gets to sending an unmistakable message, not just to our young men and women in uniform, but again, to America's many foes around the world. Every time that the United States military does something stupid, whether it is trying to integrate transgender soldiers into the military, whether it was the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, talking about how there's white rage in the military and how he was assigning Ibram X. Kendi as assigned mandatory reading for the troops there. Every single time some woke, addled, stupid, over-the-hill boomer general does that here in the United States, Xi Jinping smiles just a little bit more broadly there in Beijing. That's exactly the message that it sends. This has to stop right now. Thank goodness that Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump thus far are the guys that are making it stop. Overall, Donald Trump's really taken a sledgehammer so far to the issue of gender ideology. I seriously hope that that momentum keeps up.
Yeah, and I don't think that China is, with its military, looking at DEI and gender equality. They're looking at putting their force together. So you're absolutely spot on. It's just extraordinary that DEI was able to infiltrate the military for so many years. Now, look, President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, has arrested almost 1,000 illegal immigrants in one day alone, Josh. That was just on Sunday. Plus, it's been a busy week. Donald Trump got down to business. There's been so many arrests since he signed those executive orders. But how good is it to see Donald Trump making good on what was a key election promise?
Danica, one of my wife and I, one of our favorite things to do on TV here in the U.S. is to just watch Tom Homan interviews, because that guy gives zero you-know-whats. He just tells it like it is. And it is so refreshing to see him in the public light. But having said that, because I'm a lawyer and think about things from a constitutional background, I didn't know what to expect from Tom Homan, because his position, border czar, is not an actual constitutional position. It's not an actual position here. It's kind of an informal title. So I was personally worried. And again, I'm very hawkish in immigration. I wanted to see a full-scale deportation operation, but I was worried that Tom Homan wouldn't necessarily be given the reins of power, because that decision would ultimately fall on the DHS Secretary, Kristi Noem. So Danica, boy, am I pleased in this first week or so of the administration to see that Tom Homan does have a lot of power, that he is literally out there in places like Boston, Chicago, basically rounding up criminal illegal aliens, sending them back to Colombia. There was that whole kerfuffle with the president of Colombia, how he turned on a dime when Donald Trump threatened those tariffs there. So the whole mass deportation operation that the Donald Trump campaign, the transition team, Tom Homan, that they've all been talking about for a while now, it is off to an absolutely blistering start. And again, for those who take a fairly strict tone on the immigration issue, like myself, who believe that America is a nation state, that we deserve secure borders, and that illegal immigration is something that simply cannot be countenanced or tolerated, period, full stop, end of story. For those of us like myself who have believed this for as long as I believed in anything in politics there, this is really refreshing stuff. I hope that it keeps up as well.
Absolutely. It's so good to see. And it also goes to show the power that Donald Trump has. You mentioned what happened in Colombia, which obviously backflipped within a matter of hours after being threatened with tariffs. It goes to show this man's got so much power. He's getting down to business. And I just think from afar, it's wonderful to see. Now, this is interesting because the Pentagon is pursuing an Iron Dome style missile defense system for the United States. Now, this is already used quite successfully, I will say, in Israel to blast ballistic missiles out of the sky. It has an accuracy rating of some 90%. Josh, why is America also looking at a system like this, and what will it do for its own defense capabilities?
So Iron Dome specifically is for very low-flying projectiles. So there's various types of missile defense. There's, of course, intercontinental ballistic missile defense. Arrow 3 is the U.S. missile defense for an ICBM if you're trying to intercept from Iran, North Korea, Russia, a very sophisticated actor like that. Iron Dome is for very low-flying projectiles. That's why the IDF in Israel uses it when it comes to Hamas, to an extent when it comes to Hezbollah, because they're basically just firing lesser sophisticated mortars, rockets, things like that there. When it comes to America, I think what Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and the administration are thinking here is that, look, we've just declared the cartels in northern Mexico foreign terrorist organizations. We're going to start treating them militarily as if they are foreign terrorist organizations. That's not to say that there's going to be a military incursion into northern Mexico, but we're going to get prepared for having to actually take care of business if, God forbid, it really does come to that. It was only about 2 years ago that there were U.S. citizens in northern Mexico who were brutally murdered after being kidnapped from our side of the border, if memory serves, from some of the Mexican cartels there. And this is a massive, massive problem there in northern Mexico. America, frankly, cannot endure permanently with these absolutely murderous human trafficking rings, these people that are some of the most brutal rapists and butcherers here in the Western Hemisphere. They're right on our border. So are we getting rained on in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas the same way that, for example, the Gaza envelope is getting rained up by Hamas? No, it's not exactly the same thing there, but you have to be prepared for that at a bare minimum. And thankfully, because the U.S. and Israel work very closely when it comes to developing weapons like this there, America is probably the next country in line to benefit from this sort of technology because, again, America helped invest in Israel's Iron Dome. Therefore, it stands to benefit that they should end up getting the actual seeds of its own product.
Yeah, that's a really fair point. Now, we've got to talk about the liberal media over in the US because newscasts on ABC, CBS and NBC spent over 46 minutes covering President Trump pardoning January 6 defendants, but barely found the time to mention Joe Biden issuing preemptive pardons for his family. Now, this is according to a new study which found that the liberal broadcasters spent 46 minutes and 32 seconds on the Trump pardons compared to only 3 minutes and 32 seconds on Biden's preemptive pardons. Meanwhile, over at MSNBC, the guests keep getting better. One of them has gone on an unhinged rant about white voters who voted for Trump.
The majority of white people voted for this. This is the disgusting version of America that people want. And oh, by the way, eggs are still more expensive. So you didn't even get that. Great job, white folks.
Josh, you just got to ask yourself, why are they so angry? Why is the liberal media still struggling to grasp that America has moved on from this sort of division? It's Trump's America now. That's what Americans voted for.
Well, Danica, I was laughing as soon as I saw this clip play because Elie Mystal is someone who, for better or for worse, and dare I say for worse, I've had the great misfortune of being familiar with for a very long time now. Because before he was a mainstream political commentator, he was kind of a niche legal commentator, and he was writing about my exploits back when I was a law student. So Elie Mystal and I actually go back quite a bit here. Look, he is very typical of the American media, though, at this point there, which is that they are never going to let certain narratives go. They are going to clutch their pearls and hold on to the January 6, 2021 narrative. I think it's going to be decades. I actually don't think that this is going to go away. And I hate to say this. It's possible that this never goes away in our lifetime. I mean, they just can't get over it. I mean, they cannot acknowledge the fact that the American people have just fundamentally rejected their view of Donald Trump as a fascist insurrectionist. They're not going to let it go, frankly. And then on the other hand, when it comes to the pardons for the Biden crime family, this is unfortunately the way it's been for years and years now. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the Hunter Biden laptop story from the year 2020 in the heat of the election there. The media will do whatever it takes to bury anything that is damning of the Biden family there. Ultimately, I think it could come to the Donald Trump DOJ to launch a special counsel probe to try to get to the bottom of what happened there. Unfortunately, you probably can't reverse Joe Biden's pardons there. That's probably a plenary constitutional power, unfortunately. But at a bare minimum, you should probably at least start to investigate as to whether or not the pardons are wholly legitimate, considering the fact that he didn't really have his mental wits about him when he signed that, did he? And if we lawyers know anything about contract law, you have to be competent when you sign anything there, or else the whole contract is ultimately not worth the paper it's written on. I don't think that theory would fly in court, if I'm just being very honest with you, but it's worth a lawsuit or at least investigation.
No, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Now, this is quite shocking, Josh. More than half of the top US medical schools are plagued by anti-Semitism. A study has found unprofessional behaviour at commencements of top-ranked medical schools consisting of anti-Semitism and displaying offensive and insertive symbols and messaging. Josh, what's going on? Because we saw this on university, on college campuses all of last year across the world, but now it's infiltrating top medical schools in the United States. How has it gotten to this?
Well, unfortunately, medical schools here in the U.S. are actually some of the most woke adults of all educational institutions in America. I realize that's kind of bizarre and probably counterintuitive for a lot of the viewers, but that actually is in fact the case. So for instance, Aaron Sabarium, who's one of our very best investigative reporters here in the U.S., he writes for the Washington Free Beacon. He's done numerous exposés on this. He's focused on UCLA Med School out in California there. They're basically dumbing down their medical curricular requirements just to make sure that Black, Hispanic students do not feel inadequate for having a lower passage rate there. This is part of a broader trend that we see across American academia of just deliberately dumbing down standards. Again, to get back to what we were saying a few minutes ago, in a different context, these are exactly the kind of things that make America's enemies, from the Kremlin to the Politburo in Beijing and so forth, just smile ear to ear when we are deliberately making our people stupider there. But the DEI metastasis definitely has to do with anti-Semitism as well. I mean, when it comes to the DEI hierarchy of victimhood, the Jews are somehow an oppressor class. I don't know how that happened, frankly. I mean, my wife, her grandparents were literally kicked out of Iraq due to anti-Semitism in the early 1950s there. I keep on my desk at all times here a rock that a rabbi gave me years ago that's actually from the crematorium of Auschwitz. Actually, it was just International Holocaust Remembrance Day this week. So I'm not entirely sure where this idea of Jews as an oppressor class is coming from, but when you go down this rabbit hole of thinking about society as this two-tier system of oppressed and oppressors, and you arbitrarily assign certain people based on certain characteristics to the two classes there, all it does is it foments envy, it foments hatred there. It's terrible. Thank God that Donald Trump is doing everything he can, though, to get rid of it.
Yeah, he certainly is. As I said, it's a new world under Donald Trump. Josh Hammer, nice to catch up. Thanks very much for joining me on the show this evening.
Thank you, Danica.